So we're in part two. We're in part two of our teaching on biblical courtship and marriage. Part two. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, will it be dating or courting? Okay, and I want our youth, I want you guys to pay particular attention today, because this involves the rest of your life. Okay, this is your future. All right, so I want you guys to pay particular attention on this subject here, because what we're going to do is we're going to kind of lay the foundation here for how Beit Israel Hebraic community wants to discuss this subject and how we want to move forward. So this is the second part, biblical courtship. And again, as I said, I want all Beit Israel Hebraic community members to listen to this series. It is on the Restoration of Torah Ministries YouTube webpage. It's also on the Beit Israel Hebraic community webpage. Okay, it's also on the Beit Israel Hebraic community webpage. And it's also on the Beit Israel Hebraic community Facebook page. And I'm also going to be sending an email with a link to all of the slides. Okay, I'm going to send a link. I'm going to send you an email with a link to all of the slides. So between looking at it on YouTube, we're going to record all of these. It's probably going to be 4 or 5 messages. Between recording these and having all the slides, we want everybody. It's a requirement. Okay? Yes, I use that word, requirement. Everyone needs to listen to it, because, as I said, this is going to set the course for how we want to deal with this subject. Okay? It's going to set the course for how we want to deal with this subject. The other thing is I want to encourage all families to study and to begin talking about this subject for those children of yours for which the appropriate age has come. Okay? I want you to begin to talk about these things. I want you to begin to study them, think about them, and think about next steps for how you can implement these in your lives. Okay? I want to start thinking about that now. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I want to give you guys a definition of dating, okay? So this is a definition. I've read a few different things and kind of touched it in myself. But here's what dating is today, okay? This is what dating is. It's a premarital relationship between two people characterized by various levels of intimacy, okay? And I say that word intimacy, and it's not just what you're thinking it is, okay? It's much more. So we're going to use that word intimacy quite a bit. That's why I have it in bold and blue there. So it's a premarital relationship between two people characterized by various levels of intimacy, and it's typically 99% of the time without a commitment to marriage, okay? Most people who are dating, the majority of people who date in the world, is not because they're thinking about getting married, okay? And it's various levels of intimacy in which they seek to enjoy one another's friendship, okay? I mean, that's basically what dating is. Dating is people who like each other. It's people who want to have a relationship, a closer relationship with the opposite sex. Okay, so that's basically what dating is. It's just a very generic kind of definition there. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I want to give you some characteristics, and you guys can tell me whether or not this is true, whether or not you guys have seen this, right? Some characteristics of modern dating. First of all, modern dating is based on the collective wisdom of the world. Okay, can anybody show me any verse in the Bible that talks about how people should date? Right? All right. We're going to strike out big time. All right? And I'm going to talk about a little bit later. I'm going to talk about that silence that the Bible has about dating. Okay? Because what we're going to do is we're going to contrast dating with courtship. Okay? We're going to talk about both of them. And that's going to lead us into a discussion of marriage. But Dating is based on the collective wisdom of the world. It's what's happening out in the world. It's what we have inherited from the world. Okay? It's not something that's biblically based. All right? So the next thing is it may involve boys and girls or teens or adults. Okay? So as far as who's involved with dating. Now, I remember when I grew up in the world, and I can remember in 8th or 9th grade having a girlfriend. I remember people in grade school that had boyfriends and girlfriends, right? So that's another thing that I want us to think about is that dating is something that, and of course, who knows how young it's happening nowadays, today, right? So dating is something that's pretty much done by a lot of different ages, okay? All right, it's something done by different age groups. All right, something else that characterizes modern dating. They are usually not ready for nor interested in marriage. Now, that's the majority of the time. Now, obviously, later on, you may get some older people, more mature people, and they are thinking about getting married, and then they will date someone. Okay, but the majority of it, when you look at the entire universe of people who date, whether it's the grade schoolers who are dating, the high schoolers who are dating, and even the adults nowadays, when you look at the vast majority, most of it is not for marriage. Most of it is for the mutual enjoyment. Okay, it's for the mutual enjoyment. All right? And here's another characteristic. It may involve, and I want us to pay attention to this because this is something that's going to be very important. It may involve all levels of intimacy found in marriage without the commitment of marriage. Okay? I want us to focus in on that. It typically involves different levels, sometimes all levels of intimacy found in marriage, but it's without the commitment. And typically what happens in dating is this: intimacy precedes commitment. Okay? As a matter of fact, I'm sure that most of the older folks in here who did date when we were younger, most of the time we dated, it wasn't because we were trying to find a spouse. It was because we had interest in the opposite sex and because we wanted to develop that close friendship with them. Okay? So this is kind of what characterizes modern dating today. All right, how about another characteristic? Maturity is seldom a consideration as a prerequisite for dating. Okay? Maturity is not a prerequisite. So in other words, as I said, you have people in grade school and grammar school and high school who date. And obviously they are not mature yet. Okay? A grade schooler is not someone who's mature. Okay? A high schooler is not as mature as they will be at some point today. So I don't want to offend everyone if I just said, high schoolers are not mature, right? But you guys understand that you guys still have time to grow. Okay, you have time to grow. You have time to grow and to progress and to mature physically, emotionally, spiritually, and what have you. Okay? Oh, sorry, that wasn't up there. Marriage is seldom a purpose for dating. So we pretty much talked about that one. All right? Because of some level of desire for intimacy with the opposite sex. We talked about that. That's the reason why people date. Okay? It's not because of marriage. It's because of some level of intimacy. As I said, we will talk about that in a minute. It's to fulfill the God-given needs and desires to know and be known. Okay? Now when we talk about intimacy from a biblical point of view, what we're going to see is that Adonai put a desire within us to want to know and be known by someone else in an intimate way. That's a God-given desire. Okay? And He has put that within us. He has put it within us. And so one of the ways that we fulfill that desire is through dating. That's one of the ways that the world does it. Okay? It's through dating someone else. All right? Dating is often recreational. Okay? It's basically recreational. I mean, you do it because everyone else is doing it. You do it for different reasons also. we can't skip by this. That part of it is to fulfill the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes. Okay? That is a big draw to dating as we see it today. Okay? That is a huge and a major draw to dating right now. And occasionally, it is to determine if someone is a suitable marriage partner. Okay? And that's what I would call courting. Okay? So these are all characteristics of modern dating. Let's look at a few more. Another one is, how can I find someone who will make me happy? Okay? Right? Right? How can I find someone who's going to make me happy? That's a lot of what dating is, right? How can I find someone who's going to make me happy? Dating is characterized by very little accountability, minimum vetting, and by vetting I mean, let's say, a parent looking into the life of that person to see if they're worthy of their daughter or son. And it has limited interaction with the entire family. And again, as I said, if most of the adults here who have gone through that dating thing in our previous life before we came into Messiah, this is true. I mean, for the most part, if I had a girlfriend or something, I didn't go and ask my mother for permission. She just met her whenever I brought her home, right? Any of you guys, same thing, right? There's really no accountability there, all right? So these are the things that characterize dating. Also, it promotes lust and self-gratification and opens the door to other temptations. By its very nature, dating does this because of the lack of accountability, because of the fact that it's to find someone who's going to make you happy, because of the fact that it's recreational, because of all of these other facts that we've mentioned. Dating tends to promote that type of activity. Okay? All right. Right here, dating leads to defrauding the other person. Okay, so what do I mean by defrauding? This is what I mean by defrauding. In dating, there are different levels of intimacy that the people engage in. And if it's not appropriate for that particular age, you are defrauding someone, because what you're doing is you're trying to give them something that you know that you shouldn't be giving them, right? It has to do with defrauding. Whenever you set up desires in someone else that you cannot fulfill, then that is defrauding that other person. Okay? It is defrauding the other person. So the closer you continue to get, the closer you continue to bring your lives together without the commitment of marriage, then it is a defrauding of the other person. And then one other thing is that it's a relatively recent invention of the 20th century. Now, there have always been wicked people, throughout time, but this is really something that has come about within the 20th century. I would say probably 50s and 60s, somewhere around there, as far as this country is concerned. Before the 50s and 60s, you didn't have teens dating each other. Now, people did get married a lot earlier. Back in the 50s, 60s, and even before then, they did get married a lot earlier, but people grew up a lot faster back then because life was difficult and life was hard. And kids spent time working on, let's say, a farm, etc. So they developed a sense of responsibility earlier. And see, one of the things is we're somewhat victims of the way life is set up now, where kids, they go to school, right? So you go to school all day long, all these years. And so what happens is a lot of times kids don't have the opportunity to do things that are responsible until later on. But back in the 50s, 60s, even before then, life was difficult. And a lot of times the kids had to work in order for there to be food on the table. And so kids grew up a lot earlier back then. And so sometimes they did marry a little bit earlier also. And here's another point. It's probably the most significant factor related to failed marriages. Okay? It's probably one of the most significant factors that relates to failed marriages. And the reason why is because when you play the dating game, When you play the dating game, what happens is you're looking for someone else to fulfill your needs. You like someone or what have you. And then you know what happens inevitably? Inevitably something happens, especially if you're in teen dating, where you break up, right? Right? I had multiple girlfriends over the span of my life. Okay? So it was one girlfriend, and then after a while something would happen or whatever, we'd break up. And then it was the search for another girlfriend. Here's another girlfriend. And then after a while, break up. And then the search for another girlfriend, and on and on. And what we're doing there is we're basically practicing for divorce. It's divorce practice. That's what dating is doing. Dating is divorce practice. Because what you're doing is you're getting involved in an intimate relationship with various levels of intimacy, okay? Various levels of intimacy. And then when you don't like each other anymore, it's like, I don't like you anymore. How many relationships have some of you had in your life before Messiah where you dated someone and then something happened and then you didn't like them anymore and you break up and you don't like each other and you don't speak to each other? It's divorce practice is what it is. It's very, very subtle, but that's what's actually going on there, okay? Needing a trophy, right? We all know this. This happens in high school a lot, right? Where you do it because you need to show that you can get a girlfriend or you can get a boyfriend, right? So that other person becomes your trophy that you can show off in front of other people, okay? So these are just a lot of the different things that have happened, and I'm sure many of you can identify with a lot of these things right here and know that this is the truth. This is what drives dating. These are some of the things that drive dating. It can result in teen pregnancy, right? That's why teen pregnancy is so high. It's because of this whole idea of dating. Okay? It's also resulted in many sexually transmitted diseases, STDs, right? Because of the different levels of intimacy that are practiced in dating. And it results in various levels of intimacy with multiple people. Okay? So this is why dating is not good. Okay? This is why it's not good. All of these, for all of these different reasons here. It results in the wrong views of intimate relationships. As I said, when you don't like someone, then you get someone new, right? When you get tired of someone, then you get someone new. And one of the last things I want to say is that what it does is it opens us up to, and this should hit home with everybody, it opens us up to the knowledge of good and evil. Right there. If that one doesn't get hit home, then I don't know which one will, right? It opens us up to the knowledge of good and evil because there's certain things that we're going to learn about. And the question is, should we be learning about certain things at certain ages? All right? So let's talk about courting. Let's talk about biblical courting. All right? Courtship is a premarital relationship between a man and a woman in which they seek to determine if it is God's will for them to marry each other. And that's basically what courtship is. But notice I said it's between a man and a woman. Okay? That precludes people in grammar school, grade school, and most high schoolers. Right? It's a man and a woman. And they're trying to determine if it's God's will for them to marry or not. So what are some of the characteristics of biblical courtship? Okay? It involves adults, that's first of all, who are ready for and committed to marriage. Okay? Adults who are ready for and committed to marry. That's how it differs from dating. Something else, it involves a couple under the protection, guidance, and blessing of both sets of parents. Okay? See, these are things that we see in the Bible. Okay? These are things that we see from the scriptures. All right? It is a time and a space to develop a deeper friendship to determine if it's Adonai's will for them to marry or not. Okay? It's a time and a space to develop a deeper friendship with someone to determine if it's Adonai's will for them to marry or not. It answers the question, how can I trust Adonai to provide me with my lifelong covenantal partner? Okay? How can I trust Adonai? How can I partner with him so that he can provide me with my lifelong covenantal partner? All right? It's usually between two people who are mature, right? And I know that there are some immature adults. So I say usually two people who are mature, right? It's characterized by accountability to parents and mentors. So, in other words, what I want you to see here is that biblical dating, when you look at the characteristics of biblical dating versus the biblical dating. When you look at the characteristics of dating, basically worldly dating versus biblical courtship, you see two totally different pictures. They're pretty much the opposites, okay? They are very, very much the opposites. Another thing that characterizes biblical courtship is that many temptations are avoided and or lessened, all right? Because even those who court biblically fall into temptation at times. But those temptations will be significantly lessened because of the courtship process, because of the accountability, and because of the fact that we're doing it Adonai's way instead of the way of the world, okay? Also, defrauding is minimized, right? Defrauding is minimized because we're not touching on those certain levels of intimacy that belong in marriage that we're not able to give to the other person. So this whole area of defrauding someone else is very, very significant when it comes to dating and courtship. And then we also want to look at this, how in courtship, commitment precedes intimacy, right? Because the people who engage in biblical courtship, they are committed to finding that person that Adonai has created for them, okay? They're committed to finding that person that Adonai has created for them. And so the intimacy comes later because biblical courtship is going to avoid certain levels of intimacy. Okay? It's also a time when all involved can evaluate a potential mate, right? For the two people that are involved and for the parents also. Okay? All right. It helps avoid temptation and maintain purity. See, it's the direct opposite from dating, right? Dating is the direct opposite from dating when we engage in biblical courtship. It's a choice to trust Adonai and to seek his best and wait upon him. I mean, it is a practical way of saying, Adonai, I want to do your will. I want to trust you. I know that you can bring the right person to me. And remember what we said last week. We said that when he put Adam to sleep and he brought Eve to Adam, that is prophetic. Adonai knows how to bring you together with that person you're going to spend your life with. He knew how to bring Tina and I together, even though I'm 5 years older than her and didn't live anywhere near her. He was able to bring us together. And with us not dating, we didn't date. Tina and I did not date. Now, we didn't have a perfect courtship. We made mistakes, right? We made mistakes. But we didn't date each other. We weren't looking for someone to date. We were friends. I met Tina because of one of her friends. And as we continued to interact over the weeks and months and then the years, what happened is we both, even though we were meeting in a group with other people, Adonai awakened within her heart and he awakened within my heart a love for each other, even though we were not dating. And it got to the point where I knew it and she knew it because he opened our eyes to each other. Okay? So again, as I said, it was not perfect. But Adonai can bring you the person that he wants you to spend your lifelong commitment to outside of dating the way the world does. It prevents one from giving away their hearts. Biblical courtship prevents one from giving away their hearts piece by piece to many other people through casual dating relationships, and instead to give your whole heart to your one lifetime partner. And that's how Adonai wants it to happen, guys. He wants you guys to give your entire heart to that one person. To one person. Just like with Adam and Eve. That's his perfect will right there. All right? So what I want to do is I want to talk about intimacy because we've been using that word. So let's talk about it. All right. We all may suppose that intimacy means one thing, right? Okay. As soon as you hear the word intimacy, you guys are thinking one thing. And since we have different age groups here, I'm not going to fill in some details. All right? You guys know what I'm talking about. Right? That's right. Okay? But those who need to hear this and understand it know what I'm talking about. Here's what I want to do. I want you to look at Genesis 4:1 with me. It says, "Now Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain and said, I have acquired a man from the Lord." Okay? So I want everybody in here, I want you to think about that. Because what happened here is what's called a euphemism. Okay? It's called a euphemism, where you try to explain something using a softer tone of words, right? So when the Bible says that Adam knew Eve, okay, when it says he knew Eve, we all know what that means, okay? Those of us who are old enough to understand. Like I said, we have smaller ears here, right? We know what that means. Why does the Bible use that euphemism, that phrase, to describe the marital act? Why does he use that phrase, and he knew Eve? All right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to see that the union of a man and woman in marital relations, it is the ultimate act of intimacy. Okay? It is the ultimate act of intimacy with a man and with a husband and wife. Okay? So why is that so? We still haven't defined intimacy yet, right? We haven't defined it yet. But we're about to define it. Because as I said, I've been using this word. And I've been talking about how dating exposes us to levels of intimacy that are only reserved for the marital couple. Okay? So the question is, what is intimacy? So I'm going to give you something that I found that I think is pretty good and pretty perfect. This is what intimacy means. It means into me see. Okay? This is going to explain to us why the Bible uses the euphemism and so knew so-and-so. Because remember I said that the act of marital relations between the husband and wife, it is the ultimate act of intimacy. But intimacy involves other things other than the ultimate act. Okay? Here's what intimacy is. Intimacy is all about sharing our deepest longings, desires, hopes, dreams, fears, etc. with another person. That's what intimacy is about. Intimacy is about sharing our deepest longings. You don't do that with a casual stranger. You don't do that with just a casual friend. You don't expose your deepest longings, your deepest desires. You don't share your hopes and your dreams. And you definitely don't share your fears with just anyone. It's only with those who you are really, really close to. Intimacy means into me see. Into me. Because it's something inside. It's something special. It's something hidden that you can't see from the outside. There are things hidden within me, within my heart, that I'm only going to open up and let a few people see. So that's why that phrase, intimacy, when I say into me see, is so appropriate. Being intimate involves mixing our life with another's life. Okay? That's what intimacy is all about. The mixing of our life. It's a mingling together of body, soul, and spirit. It's a sharing of hearts. This is something we all long for because Adonai created us to have that desire, right? Adonai created us to have this desire. We were designed to connect, right? So how can we know that what I've just told you is correct? That intimacy is all about sharing your deepest longings, your deepest desires, your hopes, your fears, and sharing that so that someone else will know it, right? That's the whole thing with intimacy, is about opening yourself up so that people can know, so that that special person can know you and know something about you that no one else can know. How do we know that that's correct? Here's the reason why we know, right here. Genesis 4:1, it says, and Adam knew Eve. And it uses that phrase to explain their marital relations. In other words, when a husband and wife have marital relations, he knows her and she knows him in the most intimate and deepest way that no one else knows about. And no one else is supposed to know about. See, that's why they use that phrase, he knew her. Because when a man and a woman have marital relations, they know each other on a very, very deep level that no one else can experience. Here's another reason why we know this. In John 17:3, look at what it says here. Look at the definition of eternal life. And this is eternal life, that they may know you, the one and only true God. That's what intimacy is all about. It's all about knowing the other person. It's all about knowing the things that are secret, the things that no one else can see, no one else understands. And that's why the Bible uses this phrase, and so knew so-and-so, to describe the marital relations between a man and a woman. The various forms of intimacy and the ways that we demonstrate intimacy are good. And as a matter of fact, they are tov ma'od. They are very good, but only in the proper context, right? They are good. Adonai knew what he was doing when he created this whole thing with a man and a woman. Right? And that's something I want you guys to think about. We'll try to do this gingerly. You know what? Adonai, he's the one that came up. He's the one that thought of the whole idea, how this works. See, a lot of times, because I don't want us to come away with the idea that, this is something bad. It's not bad. It's awesome. It's good. It's tov. It's tov ma'od. It's very good. He is the one that thought of this. And he thought of how he made you as a man. And he thought about how he made you as a woman. And how you two would fit together. It was all his idea. So it's good. Right? But it has to be in the right context. It has to be in the right context. Okay? It's got to be in the right context. So here are some of the ways that we express intimacy. And it reminds me of that song, getting to know you, getting to know all about you, right? Getting to know you. All right, obviously marital relations. That's one of the ways we express intimacy. How about the kiss? Right? That's one way that we express that's one way we know someone. I'm the only person that kisses Tina. I better be, right? And she's the only one that kisses me, right? And the reason why is because we share a certain level of intimacy. We know each other in that way. How about the caress? The caress. How about the intimate embrace? How about the holding of hands? See, you guys may say, what? Holding hands? Oh, yes. Right? That's why people who are dating, that's why they want to do it. Because it's a good feeling that a young man gets when a girl holds his hand and vice versa. And the reason why is because it is an act of intimacy. It's not like the marital act. It's not like the embrace, but it is an act of intimacy. It's just not as deep as some of the other ways. And so this is what I'm saying that dating, when I said dating involves various levels of intimacy that are really reserved for a husband and a wife. Because what happens is you wind up defrauding the other person because you can't give more. You can't give, you're not supposed to anyway. Extensive time talking together. That's intimacy. Extensive time on the phone with each other. That's intimacy. That's getting to know the person. That's sharing your heart, your dreams, your fears. Extensive time with each other. Those are levels of intimacy. A deep knowledge of the other person's hopes, desires, dreams. We talked about that. And the sharing of many aspects of each other's daily lives and routines. That's what husbands and wives do. That's what husbands and wives do. Okay? All right. So, as I said, all of these various forms of intimacy are good and very good. Adonai gave us all of these desires, right? He gave them to us. And he wants us to experience them, but we need to experience them in the right context. Here's the deal. And this is a good analogy. You take a fire, and as long as that fire is in the fireplace, it's a good thing. It's going to light up the room. It's going to provide heat and warmth, and it's good. But if you take that fire out of that fireplace and you put it in some places, you got disaster on your hands. And this is what happens when we take the different levels of intimacy that Adonai intended for a man and a woman, and we let grade schoolers, teenagers use them and experience them through the process of dating. Okay? Marriage is a lifelong, as I said, I defined this last week, a lifelong covenantal commitment of a man and woman who have been joined together by God in a one-flesh relationship to fulfill Adonai's purposes in the world. If fulfilled outside of this context of biblical courtship and marriage, these are expressions of lust of the flesh and lust of the eyes. No doubt about it. Okay? I know this is tough. I know this can be a little hard. But Adonai has given us a beautiful thing in courtship and in marriage, and we need to pursue it that way. All right? Talked about, here's something, the law of unintended consequences. You guys know what I mean by that when I say the law of unintended consequences? You know, you plan on doing something, you say, okay, I got a bright idea, and you implement your idea, and you don't think, later on there's something else that happened because of your bright idea that you didn't plan on, right? Well, one of the unintended consequences of the dating game is divorce practice. We talked about that earlier. Because you learn that if you don't like this person anymore, then you get rid of them and you get somebody else. That's what happens in dating every day in our country. Dating discourages, listen to this, dating, just being able to enjoy these different levels of intimacy with someone that you're not committed to, it discourages the pursuit of the biblical purpose of marriage by offering a taste of the companionship, the intimacy, and the interactions that make marriage so satisfying with none of the accompanying commitments or responsibilities. Which is one of the reasons why people are getting married later and later on in life. It's like, why get married? I can enjoy all the benefits of marriage without getting married, without having a responsibility. That's what's happening in our world right now. In our world. That's what's happening in our world. And dating cheapens marriage. It cheapens marriage. But again, because it says, hey, you know what? You can have all of these goodies. You can have all of these goodies here with no commitment and no responsibility. Again, the unintended consequences of dating: hormones, 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 and the temptations. Okay? Lots of temptations in all those different areas of intimacy that we talked about. Okay? And all of the different areas of intimacy. And then the emotional entanglements that occur. When you begin to spend time, lots of time with any one person, and you're sharing your thoughts, your dreams, your fears, your hopes, your desires, and you are engaging in holding hands and putting your arm around each other and giving each other a kiss or what have you, what you're doing is you are emotionally entangling your heart with the other person. Emotionally, you are forming a bond with that person. Right? You're forming an emotional bond. And then guess what happens if this is not done in the biblical way, if this is done in the way of the world? Hey, when you get tired of that person, I'm out of here. And I'll go find someone else. And that's what happens. That's what happens in our world. Okay. Dating involves aspects of intimacy that Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2 teach are reserved for adults who are related in a marriage relationship. Okay? And again, as I said, what Genesis 1 through 2 teaches us is that the intimacy of a man and a woman is to be within the context of marriage. Now, when it comes to teen dating, teens are not ready to fulfill the biblical roles expected for the level of intimacy that will occur during dating. That's all about maturity, okay? We all need to mature, okay? We all need to mature. There's certain levels of maturity that we don't have as a teen, and what we want to do is we want to be able to allow Adonai to grow us up. The other thing is that not only do the teens not necessarily meet the biblical roles. So, for instance, here's the point that I'm making is that we should not get ourselves involved in levels of intimacy that have certain prerequisites. Okay? So that's what we're talking about. The Bible supposes that if we're going to be involved in certain areas of intimacy, that we're meeting the prerequisites, which is we're either mature enough, we're old enough, we're a man or a woman, and we're interested in courting or dating and getting married. And so, as I said earlier, the Bible doesn't say much about dating. It doesn't say anything about dating directly. You want to know the reason why? The reason why is because Adonai has already told us all that we need to know about who should be involved in these different forms of intimacy. It's those who are courting and those who are married. Those are the ones. That's why everything in Genesis, it's between a man and a woman. In Genesis, we don't read about how Adonai brought one grade schooler to another grade schooler, right? Or one teen to another teen. But we do read about how he brought one man to a woman. And so he's already defining for us what he wants. There's no need for him to have to say, well, teen dating is not right. Because he's already telling us what is right. He's already telling us what is right. Here's something else. Teens, even young adults, all right, 16, 17, 18 years old, 19 maybe. And even young adults are still growing a lot of times physically, emotionally, and mentally, and still need time to develop. And I know that our teens, I look at you guys over there, and I know you guys want to be adults. Yes. Hey, what's going on? I know you want to be adults, and I know that you don't want us parents to baby you forever, right? You guys are looking to spread your wings and fly, and a lot of times you don't want mommy and daddy hindering you in doing that. All I want to say is just remember that you're still developing. You're still developing. You are not the same person. You're not the person today who you're going to be 3 or 4 years from now. You're not. You have so many years to mature and develop. Okay? I got married when I was 28 years old. Okay? Now, that's not saying that anyone's supposed to wait late. Actually, I think it's better to marry earlier than that. It's just the situation in my life. Okay? It was just a situation. But a lot of times we think that if we don't hurry up and get married, that life is going to pass us by. And it's not true. We need to learn to be patient. We need to learn to be patient and to wait on the Lord. Okay? We need to learn how to wait on Him. So the teens, those years are not the years to be spent focusing. In teen years, here's something else. When you're a teenager, it's okay to not be focusing on marriage. You don't need to. You're not supposed to. Right? You're supposed to be growing and becoming an adult. Right? There's a time for marriage, and it's when you're older. There's a time for the intimacy. There's a time for the intimacy of a married that is experienced by married people, but it's later. And you guys have an entire life ahead of you. And so we just want to keep everything in the correct order. Okay? And because right now, you have your perspective of time is limited. And a lot of times when you're younger, you think that you need to experience things quickly. Like right now, I've got to experience this. This is part of my growing up. And you do need to experience things in your life. You do need to experience them, but in the proper time and in the proper context. Okay? All right, almost finished here. This last point here where I talked about the collective experience of those of us who have experienced teen dating teaches us that it's wrong. This is wisdom calling out on the streets. Because, see, most of the parents in here, we were brought up under the world system. We know what it's like. We've been there, and we know it's no good. I don't even have to preach the word to you. I can just tell you from my life. Tina can tell you from her life. She can talk to you about her old boyfriends. I can talk to you about my old girlfriends, and all the adults in here can talk to you about their boyfriends and girlfriends that they had before they met the Lord. And you want to know something? I guarantee you every one of us would just say, not good, disaster, wait on the Lord, wish I could have done it over. Wish I could have done it God's way. I wish I could have done it God's way. Okay? All right. So teen dating is not biblical, but adult courtship is. I like that little phrase there. Teen dating is not biblical, but adult courtship is. All right? So what should teens be doing? You should be learning your future roles and responsibilities, okay? Learning your future roles and responsibilities and preparing for those roles and responsibilities so that A, you meet the prerequisites for marriage when the proper time comes, and B, that you are successful in your marriage, okay? And we're going to talk about that later. In other words, it's easy to just say, well, you should be preparing for that pre-courtship time in your life. Well, what do I need to do? We'll talk about that. On another teaching. But what I want to do is I'm going to end with this last statement here. What I want to do is I want to give you guys my twofold guarantee. I'm going to guarantee, especially our teens, I'm going to guarantee to you guys that I'm going to guarantee you a couple of things. The first thing that I'm going to guarantee to you is that at some point, because I understand that this may seem like a downer to some of you guys. All right, some of you guys it may, and I know some of you, and I already heard one teen tell me today, hey, I'm waiting for this teaching. I can't wait to hear it, and they pretty much know the direction I'm going to go, and they're pleased. But I know it's not that way with everyone. But here's my twofold guarantee. I'm going to guarantee you two things. I don't know if it's going to take 1 year, 2 years, 3, 4, 5, or 10 years, or 20 years. But at some point in your future, you're going to look back on this teaching right here in this congregation here, where this congregation said, hey, you know, teen dating is not biblical, don't do it, you're going to look back and you're going to say, you know what? Amen. They were right. Right. No matter how much you may disagree with it right now, there's going to come a time in your life when you're going to look back and you're going to say, that was right. Right? Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Guaranteed, no matter how much you may think that it's not right. Okay? So here, I want to have Josh Huey come up. We're going to spend about 15 more minutes. And I asked Josh to come up and to speak about this. And here's the reason why. Josh and Elise, they got married at a very, very young age. Okay? They got married at a very young age. Right? So they're just a few years beyond some of you guys sitting over there. So they know where you're coming from. You know, you may be able to look at me and say, you old dude. You may look at me and say, man, you're 57 years old. You know, I can't relate to you. So what I did is I asked Josh if he would come and just give a couple of words about this subject. And so, Josh, if you can come forward, that'd be great. It's a pain doing that. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
But like I said, you just have to turn around.
All right, cool. Thank you. All right, so if you're like me, it was hard for me because I heard my dad growing up, oh, when I was in the world, blah, 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 and I just couldn't relate because I'm going to be 23 years old, and every single year I was raised up in Torah, and that's been a huge blessing, but I also found it came as a disservice to me when I was trying to relate to those people that were talking about when they were in the world, when they were dating, and such. And so I'm going to offer you a new perspective, since most of you share this perspective with me, being second-generation believers. And so I have done dating, courting, everything in between. And I've messed up almost everything. So I consider myself an expert in what not to do. So let me just start off by talking about a little bit about why I'm talking to you guys. Because it's certainly not because I'm smarter, better, holier. That's not it. I'm up here because I had to learn these lessons about relationships the hard way. I'm here because God chose to extend His grace to me even when I was in rebellion to Him. And it's like it says in Romans, it says, but God shows His love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That's because God doesn't love like we do. God loves like God does, and thank God for that. So, we'll start off. So, coming from my perspective, doing both, which is better? I'm going to say that it doesn't matter. Because if your heart is not where it's supposed to be, it doesn't matter what you call it. So track with me here. So like kind of what I say here, while each couple holds the power to dictate how they walk out the relationship, it doesn't matter what you call it to an extent. But if you're dating as opposed to courting, there's certain influences and stigmas that go with those terms. So dating, like Tony said, is typically more worldly, and it's very reactionary, very short-term thinking, and you're not thinking about marriage, you're thinking about what am I going to do next? What high am I going to reach next? It's like an addiction at times. And so, whereas dating is more worldly, courtship is biblical. And the reason is that is because instead of focusing on the individuals, Courtship focuses on how these families are coming together. Because when you get married, you don't think about this when you're in love and young and going to the movies, but you are meshing two families together. Two different sets of values. How do we raise our kids? What do we prioritize in our lives? Etc., etc. And so, here's just kind of a visual aid for the difference as I define it, because while I looked up the definitions, I found it better and more fulfilling to just give my own definitions based off my experiences with each. And so the big thing between dating and courtship is accountability. Because when I dated, I avoided the girl's parents. Like, I don't want to mess with you, you stay out of my way, I'll stay out of your way. But when I courted, I actively sought approval, I actively sought to impress, and there was just general guidelines set forth based off of the expectation of what does God expect of you. And so, a bit of background on my situation. Some of you may not know, but I met my wife at a summer camp when I was 13 years old. I wasn't even supposed to be there because it was a camp in Oklahoma called Camp Yeshua. And the minimum age was 14, but somehow we talked him into letting me go because I was mature. Yeah, right. Anyway, while we dated, and if it's all right with y'all, I'm going to be completely candid. So take it for what it's worth. While we dated, we made a lot of mistakes because we believed we were unique and our relationship was special and nobody could understand what we were feeling. I know, it's stupid. So because we thought that we were unique, and now that I've been married almost 5 years, I do believe we're unique. I believe we have a special bond, but that's not the point. The point is, I tried to use that concept to say, well, they just don't understand, so obviously the rules that they try to put me under are invalid because I don't get it. They're old-fashioned, dumb, they don't get it. So instead, while we believed that we were special, we chose to push boundaries, emotional, physical, mental, everything. We believed that nobody could possibly understand how we felt, and that gave us a license to do what we wanted. But Solomon says not to awaken passion or love before it's time. And he was the wisest guy to ever live, is what I heard. But I blew him off too, just like I did my dad. The truth was that no matter how in love we were not mature enough to protect each other from ourselves. And so we avoided boundaries and we pushed away advice and guidelines from our parents. This resulted in a lot of unnecessary hurt in our relationship, hurt that gave us scars that we carried into our marriage. And anybody who's been married knows that those things can be difficult. So, a little history. We were involved since I was 13, 14. But 5 days after I turned 18, I was in college, and I decided I was going to drive up and propose. 5 days into legal adulthood. I couldn't even buy a beer. Not that I would, but I barely could even sign up to get credit to buy a couch. So when I got married, I was nowhere near husband material. I had a part-time job, I had an associate's degree, and I had no savings. I had little to no work experience, and I didn't have a clue. I didn't know how to pay my taxes. I didn't know how to get health insurance. I didn't know why I needed health insurance. By the way, you do. So within the first month of our marriage, my family was begging me to get a divorce. Like, no joke. When your mother is telling you, what have you done? You've made this huge life-altering, disastrous decision. You need to get out of it. I mean, I was 18 years old. And switching from I look up to my mother, she tells me what to do, to my mother's my peer, It's hard. But during that time, I worked 3 jobs and still managed not to have any money. We did not have the emotional tools and maturity to engage each other in a constructive manner. And so what I mean by that is when you have a disagreement, which you will, if you don't have the tools to deal with the disagreement in a way that's not going to blow up, then you're going to be in a constant state of chaos, and you're going to be ready to walk away at any given point. And so we did not have the idea of what a commitment was. And so that leads me into saying commitment. Commitment is holding your wife's hair back while she's violently throwing up, thinking, oh my Lord, this could not be any worse. Or it's just looking at her and thinking, God, I really don't like you right now, but then you go out and you get her a coffee because she needs it. So you're not always going to like your significant other. I hate to burst that bubble, but you won't. But that's okay, because this may seem cliche, but love is an action. It's not something that you're always going to feel. And so in a biblical sense, when you love somebody, you're putting their needs above your own. And so you're going to be doing that a lot. And so, moving on. So here's kind of what I talked about. Being a pastor's son, I thought that I was better than everybody else. I'm holier. I know the word. So all these little fence laws that people put around their relationships, I don't need those. I'm gonna do my thing, and it's gonna be all right. It wasn't all right. It was a disaster. So one thing is, believing your situation is unique. We talked about that. So you throw out the rule book because you say, that doesn't apply to me. Believing that you're able to withstand temptation, and therefore putting too much faith in yourself, you put yourself in compromising situations. Just that speaks for itself. If you care about pursuing things in a righteous and godly manner, don't do that, because I remember being a teenager, 16, 17, 18 years old, and it's like my brain would shut off. And I would just say, whatever, I'll deal with the consequences later, I don't care. And I'm sure all of you young men can relate to that. So, as I said before, it's God's unmerited favor that we were able to move past that. But that definitely wasn't the last of our trials in our marriage. We were pregnant within 3 months. We remember the no money thing? Yeah, that worked out great. We moved 3 times in that year, including having to live in the apartment above Elise's parents' garage. Nothing against that. It's a nice place, but we had to use the restroom in a upside-down bleach container with the bottom cut out. So that's great. I'm trying to give you a vivid picture so that you can really vibe with me here. This is just going over the things that happened within the first 6 months. Our relationship was on life support. I can't tell you how many times there were tears, slammed doors, harsh words, because you go to church and you act like everything's great, but that doesn't mean that everything's great. You don't know what people are going through when they go home and they shut their door. You don't know what's going on in their living room on Wednesday. Or, what I'm saying is, you don't know people like I don't know people like I thought I knew people. And so, here's the thing. Our relationship was built off of poor choices before marriage. And we had that much more baggage to deal with when we did finally get married. I remember several times just emotionally shutting down to hide myself from the hurt of those mistakes. And that's something that I don't want any of you to have to go through. Because you can avoid that by listening to the ones who've been there before. And I know that sounds easier than it is, because that's what my dad told me, and I told him to forget it. And so I regret that, because I remember spending our first anniversary in my parents' house because my dad died. And I remember being out of work for a month dealing with his estate. I remember looking at my wife and daughter after that and realizing what I had to become for them, because I was a 19-year-old kid raising a kid. God's grace. I remember after that losing 80 pounds in 7 months after an infection. I remember that taking a huge... It's just like, remember the whole health insurance thing? Yeah. Lifesaver. But here's the thing. Things happen that you don't expect to happen. And so I remember every night staying up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning because I was trying to finish my degree because I blew it off because I couldn't wait. Because I wanted that intimacy. And here's the thing. Here's the things to consider that I wish that somebody would have made a checklist for me. And somebody probably did, and I probably blew them off. But I'm telling you this, don't blow this off. Are you ready for marriage? I don't know. Are you ready for the possibility of kids? Because they're going to happen. I mean, they can happen. And so, if you're not ready for kids, then you shouldn't be getting married. Do you have a job that could support a family when said kids arrive? Do you already support yourself? Because, let me tell you, it's expensive. I remember having several months in the negative trying to just pay the bills when we first got married. Because I worked 3 part-time jobs, and I remember some weeks living off of $200 a week. And those who have lived on an adult budget realize how ludicrous that is. Do you own a vehicle? Do you pay the insurance on that vehicle? Are you ready to handle complex emotions? It's a lot more than happy, sad, angry. Those things branch off into a million little things. And when you get married, especially you guys who are used to dealing with simple emotions, I'm happy, I'm hungry, I'm upset, I'm sad. Women have a lot more emotions to deal with than that. And so you're going to run into some issues. So I suggest that you start reading up on that. Now, I have learned, like I said, almost every lesson in my life the hard way. I have made every mistake you can imagine, and some you probably can't imagine. I have lived in sin, I have chosen wrong, but I have been redeemed by Yahweh. And just because, even if you have messed up, that doesn't mean that you can't stop, because His mercies are new every day when you open your eyes. And so it's no excuse to keep perpetuating a sinful lifestyle. And so my marriage has been redeemed from what I thought was going to be the quickest marriage since Britney Spears, because she was married for 24 hours, but we were a little bit longer than that. We got past that mark. But here's the bottom line. You are saving yourself so much pain if you listen to what Tony's saying, to what I'm saying, to what your parents are saying, because we're not trying to put you down. Because believe it or not, your parents want what's best for you because they've lived it. My dad wasn't telling me the things he told me because he wanted to squash me, because he wanted to watch me suffer, because he is trying to save me from myself, my sinful nature, and my poor decision making. And I'm not saying that you can't get married young. I got married when I was 18 years old. I wouldn't recommend it. But that's your thing, that's your thing. But here's the bottom line is you have got to make sure that you've got your house in order. Men especially, the scripture talks about counting the cost, because if a man tallies up his bricks and his hay and all that stuff and he goes to build a tower and he gets 3/4 of the way up and he runs out of stuff, he looks like a fool. And so if you go and you make your preparations, you set your foundation for this life that you want to build, and you don't have the tools, you don't have the material to complete it, says it's better that you just never start than to put your hand to the plow and stop halfway. And I have one more point that I'd like to make quickly. Okay, and these go hand in hand. And so firstly, if you truly, I know you're in love, and it's like a fever that's been spread going around. Everyone's falling in love. I understand, I get it. But if you truly love this person, you don't want to love them like the world loves them. You want to love them like our Messiah loved us. Because we were in, like I said before, we were in rebellion, and he came down and he was brutally murdered so that he could save us. And eventually we would come to that knowledge and repent. But we weren't repentant when he did that. And so you want to seek to protect one another from these things, from each other, from temptation. Because believe it or not, things change. And I remember thinking when I was 15 years old that I was going to marry a girl. And now that girl's married to my best friend. And so my point is that life changes and you have a limited perspective. You want to practice discipline, modesty, and pursue all righteousness, both as individuals and as a couple. Because if your eyes are focused on God and what He cares about, and you're both doing that, odds are things are going to work out how they need to. And consider that God's blessing on your eventual marriage should be the focal point for every decision you're making in any premarital involvement. Because, let me tell you from experience, talking to your wife or talking to your husband about past experiences with other people is the hardest thing in the world to do. And if you can save yourself from that, do it. So I wanted to read a couple of scriptures about this that I thought were absolutely cool. So 2 Timothy says, "Now flee from youthful lust and pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart." And so if you're walking with people who love the Lord, they got your back. They should have your back. Because there's power and camaraderie with righteous brothers and sisters. And I did not have that. You guys are so blessed to have a youth group like you have. Because I had all my friends, they were sinners. And it made it hard not to be one myself. So we talk about love. 1 Corinthians says, "Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres." You're going to need that when you get married. 2 Corinthians says, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and Belial? Or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? For we are the temple of the living God, as God has said, 'I will live with them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they will be my people.'" But I assume that's a no-brainer. if the person you're interested in is not saved, you have no business being involved with them. And so I know, because I was doing it about 5 years ago, how easy it is to romanticize marriage. And let me tell you, those things that I imagined what life would be like married, first off, those are just only now starting to happen almost after 4.5 years. Because it took that long for me to catch up, for us to catch up from, I mean, you're talking about 4 years of our lives. Just redirecting damage, healing, repenting, asking each other forgiveness, asking forgiveness from our Father. And you don't have to do that. That's not a prereq to getting married. Mistakes are not a prereq to get married. And so, as someone who had to date, court, everything in between that, their significant other for years before we were able to get married, I can attest to the roadblocks that were created by impatience, stubbornness, and just being sinners. That's what it comes down to. But by God's grace, I consider us to have one of the best marriages ever right now. I love my wife. My wife loves me. We have 2 beautiful children. We live a comfortable lifestyle, and none of that is from me. All of that is God's grace, because if I got what I deserved by the choices I made, I would be divorced and probably living in my parents' basement, because I don't deserve what God's given me. But that's why I'm up here talking today, because people go through things so that bad things happen to good people, so that those people can in turn give a testimony to other people, and maybe, just maybe, save them some of the heartache. Show them a better way. And so, I guess I want to end with this point. Like I said, bad decisions are not a prerequisite to getting married. You don't have to learn things the hard way. And I would implore you to seek the Lord if you are involved in a relationship or thinking about it, and take your time. Seek the Lord and take your time. And that's it.
Thank you, Josh. Hallelujah. Any of you guys want to say anything? Anybody? Yes, Tom.
I'm Tom. Most of you don't know me. A few of you do. I'm a friend of Thane and Janet's, so they know a little of my background. And all of you young people, you might have felt like this was all focused to you, or the majority focused to you, but it isn't. Because by your reckoning, I'm old. I'm 59 years old. I first got married when I was 30 years old. I was sought by my church congregation for my maturity in leadership positions as a teacher. I thought I was well-grounded in Scripture. I did not date in high school. I did not date in college. I didn't date my early time in the military. I joined the military at 25. No relations with women at all. Kept myself pure. Got into the military, became involved in the world, and I was not ready for the emotions for the pressure that the world puts on you. Even with having been a deacon in my church, having been a Sunday school teacher, having done all these things, I was not ready for it. And it just overwhelmed me. And I let it ruin my life. I got married because of peer pressure. My friends were getting married. Everybody was married. I was getting old. Life was passing me by. I need to do something about this. I got married. It lasted 2.5 years. My first son was born. And when I was in stationed in Louisiana at the time. She was in Maryland. She refused to go with me when I got reassigned. When I went up for the birth, she ran around and locked the doors, locked the windows, and yelled out the upstairs window, "Go away, we don't need you, we're fine without you." And my faith came crashing down because I thought I was ready for this. I thought I was prepared. I thought I was wise.